The night Pat Murphy ran out of answers. There is a specific kind of silence that fills a press conference room when a manager has just lost a game he cannot explain. Not the silence of defeat. Defeat has its own language, the clipped answers, the redirected questions, the careful praise for the opponent wrapped around the careful protection of the self. Managers learn that language in the minor leagues and speak it fluently for the rest of their careers. This was a different silence. This was the silence of a man who had prepared for a baseball game and found himself, somewhere in the middle of it, watching something that baseball had not prepared him for. A man who had managed in this league long enough to believe that he had seen the full range of what the sport could produce. A man who sat down at that microphone with the expression of someone who had spent the last 3 innings revising, downward, his understanding of what was possible. Pat Murphy cleared his throat. The reporters waited. He looked at the table. And then he said something about the Cy Young Award that nobody in that room had expected to hear from the losing manager's podium on a Tuesday night in June. The baseball world has not stopped talking about it since. But before the press conference. Before the debate. Before the Cy Young conversation split the sport into factions arguing across every platform that covers the game. Before all of that, there was the performance. And the performance is where this story has to begin. Because without understanding what happened between the white lines on June 3, 2026, the words Pat Murphy chose afterward make no sense. They make no sense as frustration. They make no sense as deflection. They make no sense as anything other than what they were, the honest, somewhat helpless response of a manager who had watched something extraordinary and was trying, in real time, to find a framework that could contain it. There was no framework. There still isn't. Shohei Ohtani's first pitch of the game was a fastball. It crossed the plate at 97.4 miles per hour, caught the inner half, and the hitter, who had been told, presumably, what was coming, who had spent the previous day reviewing footage and sitting in meetings about approach and attack zones and what to look for, took it for a called strike. He looked at it the way hitters look at pitches that are faster than their preparation told them to expect. The stadium registered it. Not loudly. The way a crowd registers a first pitch that tells it something about what the next 3 hours are going to feel like. It was the first of 91 pitches Ohtani would throw across 6 innings. Of those 91 pitches, the Diamondbacks would make meaningful contact with a number that can only be described as embarrassing for a lineup that entered the game hitting .267 as a unit. 0 runs. 6 innings. A performance so complete that the conversation in the press box had shifted, by the 4th inning, from whether the Dodgers would win to whether what was happening on the mound belonged in the same conversation as the greatest individual pitching performances of the modern era. By the 5th, that conversation had answered itself. The sweeper was the weapon of the night. Not exclusively, Ohtani is not a one-pitch pitcher, has never been a one-pitch pitcher, and the idea that any single offering defines him misunderstands the fundamental nature of his arsenal. But the sweeper, on this particular evening, was operating at a level that separated itself from even his own standard. It broke late. That is the simple description, and it is accurate, and it is also completely insufficient. The way a sweeper breaks, the moment in its trajectory where the horizontal movement exceeds what the hitter's brain has calculated and the hands have already committed, is a timing problem as much as a physical one. The pitch looks like one thing for 60% of its journey and becomes something else for the final 40. Hitters train for this. They study movement charts and spin rate data and release point consistency, looking for the fraction of a second earlier that gives them enough time to adjust. Against Ohtani's sweeper on June 3, that fraction of a second did not exist. 4 strikeouts came directly from it. 3 more came from fastballs thrown after sweepers that had recalibrated the hitter's internal clock, fastballs that registered as faster than they were because the body was still recalibrating from the pitch before. The sequencing was not accidental. It was the product of an understanding of opposing hitters that goes beyond scouting reports and into something more intuitive, more real-time, more responsive to what the hitter in the box was showing him on each individual pitch. He was not executing a game plan. He was playing chess, in real time, at a speed that the other side could not match. By the third inning, the Diamondbacks dugout had the look of a team that had identified the problem and arrived at the conclusion that identifying the problem was not the same as being able to solve it. The third inning was also when the first murmur of something larger began in the press box. Era. The number that sits next to Ohtani's name in the pitching statistics this season. The number that had caused more than one baseball analyst to look at their screen twice, refresh the page, and look again. 0.74. After tonight's 6 scoreless innings, it would not move dramatically. But it would remain what it had been since roughly the midpoint of May, a figure that belongs in a different era of the sport, a figure that the current run environment was not supposed to be capable of producing, a figure that statistical models built on decades of performance data had not projected as a realistic outcome for any pitcher in 2026. 0.74. For context, the last pitcher to finish a full season with an ERA below 1.00 did so in 1968. A year so dominated by pitching that Major League Baseball lowered the mound the following season to restore balance to the game. A year that existed in a completely different offensive environment, against completely different hitters, with completely different equipment, under completely different conditions. Ohtani was doing it in 2026. Against lineups that had been constructed, specifically, to punish pitchers. Against hitters who had access to every piece of technology that modern baseball had developed to give offense the advantage. Against a run environment that was, by historical standards, extraordinarily hostile to the kind of number sitting next to his name in the ERA column. By the fourth inning, the press box conversation had a word. Cy Young. It was not the first time the word had been used this season. Ohtani's name had appeared in Cy Young discussions since April, had been a fixture in them since May, had become, by early June, essentially synonymous with the award in the minds of everyone who followed the sport closely enough to have an informed opinion. But June 3rd was different. Because June 3rd produced, in addition to the numbers, the kind of visual evidence that statistics can point toward but never fully replace. The kind of performance that people watch and then immediately want to tell other people about, not because the box score is impressive but because they saw something that needed to be witnessed to be believed. 5 innings had passed by the time the 6th inning arrived. 5 innings of something that the sport had not seen before and would not know how to categorize properly until long after the final out was recorded. Then the 6th inning began, and Ohtani was still on the mound, and the Diamondbacks sent up their lineup again, and he did it again. 3 up. 3 down. 6 scoreless innings. The mound was finished. The work was done. He walked toward the dugout the same way he had walked toward the mound, with that particular Ohtani stillness, that complete absence of performance in either direction, no fist pump for the success and no visible awareness of the crowd that was making a sound for him that stadiums make for very few players in any given decade. He sat down. The Dodgers bullpen took over. The conversation he had started on the mound moved immediately to the press box, to the broadcast booth, to both dugouts, to the league office where the people responsible for tracking these things track them. It moved, eventually, to Pat Murphy's podium. Reaching base 5 times in a game is not a coincidence. It is not luck, not the random variance that baseball distributes across a 162-game season in ways that occasionally produce outlier results for players in ordinary moments. Reaching base 5 times in a game is the product of a specific, refined, operating at peak capacity version of a hitter doing everything the discipline requires. Ohtani reached base 5 times on June 3rd. As the pitcher. This is the sentence that the sport keeps running into and cannot fully process. Not as a designated hitter. Not in a separate role, on a separate night, in a separate context that allows the brain to file the hitting away from the pitching and appreciate each in isolation. In the same game. On the same night. Against the same pitching staff that he had spent 6 innings defeating from the other direction. The math of this is straightforward enough. The experience of watching it is something else entirely. His first plate appearance came in the bottom of the 1st. The Diamondback starter had prepared for Ohtani the hitter the way any pitcher prepares for any hitter, through film, through scouting reports, through the accumulated intelligence of an organization that employs people whose entire job is to find the vulnerability in an opposing lineup and exploit it. What the reports likely said about Ohtani: be careful with pitches over the inner half, his pull-side power is historic, his chase rate on breaking balls down and away has shown improvement this season, he will look to do damage early in counts. What the reports could not convey: what it feels like to stand 60 feet and 6 inches from him with a baseball in your hand and the full weight of his attention directed at you. The pitcher threw. Ohtani hit a line drive single to left field. Clean. No drama. The kind of hit that a very good hitter produces because he was in the right position mechanically, saw the pitch early, and put the barrel where the pitch was going. He stood on first base and looked at nothing in particular. 1. His second plate appearance came in the third inning, and this one was different. The pitcher, facing him now for the second time, now with information that the first at-bat had produced, tried to go to a different location. Something that the scouting report had suggested might produce a weaker contact. Something on the outer edge, something designed to neutralize the pull-side threat and force him to go the other way. Ohtani went the other way. The ball found the right center gap. He stood at second base with a double, and for a moment, just a moment, something crossed his face that might have been satisfaction, though it was gone too quickly to confirm. 2. Third plate appearance, fifth inning. By now the Diamondback starter had been replaced. Fresh arm. Different look. Different release point, different spin characteristics, different sequencing tendencies. The kind of reset that pitching changes are designed to provide, the interruption of the hitter's rhythm that a new pitcher produces simply by being new. It did not work. Ohtani worked a full count, 7 pitches, each one a negotiation, each one a piece of information being gathered and processed, and on the 8th pitch of the at-bat, he hit a line drive that split the outfielders and sent him to first base. Walk and a hit by pitch would complete the 5 eventually. Each one unremarkable in isolation. Each one, in the context of the night's larger architecture, another piece of evidence being added to a case that was already overwhelming. By the time Ohtani's 5th trip to the plate was complete, the number was sitting there in the box score. 5. 5 times on base. As the pitcher. The broadcast team spent 3 full minutes, between innings, simply reading the statistic aloud in different configurations. Not because they were struggling for content. Because they were genuinely trying to find the phrasing that communicated what the number actually meant, and every version they tried felt like it was underselling it. A former player who was contributing analysis that night had played 12 years in the major leagues. Had faced Hall of Fame pitchers. Had been part of playoff runs and World Series teams and All-Star games and every significant context the sport makes available to a player good enough to reach its highest level. He looked at the camera after the 5th on base was recorded. "I don't know what we're watching," he said. "I genuinely don't know what we're watching." He was not being rhetorical.